All right. Good evening, everyone. Happy Tuesday, as opposed to the usual Thursday, as of course we've got the budget meeting this Thursday, so we've been displaced. So welcome everyone, members, officers, and members of the public to this meeting of the Planning Committee, as well as anybody who's watching either live or on the recording on the YouTube channel. Before the meeting starts tonight, I'd like to invite the committee clerk, Amy Cantrell, to explain how proceedings will work.
If a member wishes to speak, they should use the speak button located on the microphone unit. The microphone will light up green and the chair will be alerted to your request. When the chair invites you to speak, your microphone will be made live and will turn red, at which point you can speak. When the public participants are invited to speak, their microphones will be made live by the committee officer. When requested to vote, voting will be via the yes, no, abstain button on your microphone unit. Details of how members voted will be shown on the screens around us and will be visible on the YouTube stream. In the event of a tied vote, the chair will have the casting vote. Are there any questions before we start the meeting? I will hand back to the chair then. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Right. So item 1 is apologies for absence. I've received apologies from Councillor Tom Tyson, Councillor Amy Allen and Councillor Sadie Billing. Having given due notice, Councillor Steve Jarvis will substitute for Councillor Tyson and Councillor Val Bryant will substitute for Councillor Allen. Are there any further apologies?
No.
Sorry? There we go. Okay. Item number 2 is the minutes of the meeting held on the 30th of January 2025. I propose that we take as read and approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 30th of January 2025 as a true record of proceedings. Could I have a seconder, please? Yeah, Councillor Mason. Okay. Is there any comments on the minutes? Seeing nobody indicate, could we have a vote, please?
That vote's carried.
Thank you very much. Right. Which brings us on to item number 3, notification of any other business. There is none. Chair's announcements. Recording. In accordance with council policy, this meeting is being recorded. The recording will be available on the council's YouTube channel as well as on the council's ModGov site alongside the documents from this evening's meeting. Declarations of interest. Members are reminded to make declarations of interest before an item, and the detailed reminder about this and speaking rights is set out under the chair's announcement on your agenda packs. And to clarify matters for registered speakers, members of the public in groups of supporters or objectors have up to 3 minutes per person. I don't think we have a group, it's just a single one of you this evening, which means that you've got a total of 5 minutes to speak. I will let you know when there is roughly 1 minute remaining. I'm not going to interrupt or put you off while you're in full flow. There will be a clock displayed on the corner of the screen as well, so I will be I will let you get on with it. I can't find words tonight. I've not put my teeth in. And at the end of 5 minutes, if you could wrap up, that would be great. If you're in the middle of a sentence, I will let you finish the point. But if it's running over too long, I'll ask you to stop. Okay, great. Section 4.8.23a of the Constitution. For the purposes of clarification, in order to vote on an agenda item at this meeting, a member must be present for the entirety of the debate and consideration of that item. If a member leaves the room at any point of the item, they will not be able to vote. Now, I'll move on to the withdrawal of an item from the agenda. We had an email this evening from committee from committee services, and agenda item 7, which was application reference 24/02606, FP, land west of Tuthill House, has been withdrawn from this evening's agenda. I apologise for this. We received additional information very late in the day yesterday, which required considerable thought and attention. We'll be reviewing that, and we will be bringing this item back to a planning committee as soon as is practically possible. But apologies, colleagues, for the late notice of the withdrawal. It's not ideal, but on this occasion, I think that it was the right decision to make. Right, so we've got a shorter evening tonight than we thought we might have had earlier today. I have got two members who will be participating as members of the public. That is Mr. Sean Doherty, who's the applicant for the remaining item of business, and also Councillor McDonnell is going to be acting as a member advocate on this item as well. So that brings us on to our only substantive item of business this evening, which is application 24/02577/FPH 4 Arch Road, Great Wymondley, Hitchin, Hertfordshire, SG4 7EP. I believe Councillor McDonnell has something to declare.
In this act.
You do, because you're the member advocate. So would you like, please, to move to this public speaking gallery, also known as the row of tables behind you? All right, I think we are all settled. So, Andrews, over to you to present your report.
Thank you, Chair. There aren't any updates on this to report, so if we could go straight to the slides, please. Okay, thank you. So the site is a two-storey semi-detached dwelling. It's part of a small group of dwellings at the southern part of Great Wymondley. The character of the area is predominantly rural, and the site is in the Greenbelt and also in a conservation area. So next slide, please. This is a photo showing the front of number 4 with the main dwelling on the left and its garage with a green door right of centre, and the garage with the white door is number 5's, and the gap between the garage of number 4 and the side of number 4 is the location proposed for the outbuilding, the subject of this application. Next photo. So the two garages are centred with numbers 4 and 5 on the left and right respectively. Next photo. And this shows a clearer more of number 5, and the garage of number 4 is on the left of the photo. Next photo. And this is a closer view of number 4. Next photo. And this is number 4 and its garage looking from the northwest. And last photo. This is showing the front of number 4 itself more clearly. Then we can go on to the plans, please. So this is the site location plan. Next plan, please. The existing and proposed site plan with the proposed outbuilding shown on the bottom right of the 3 plans there. Next slide, please. The existing and proposed floor plans, the proposed floor plan of the building shown on the bottom plan. Next plan, the proposed existing and proposed elevations with the front of the proposed building shown on the bottom. Next plan, and again, the remaining existing and proposed elevations with the other elevations of the building shown on the bottom of that plan. And end of presentation. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Andrew. Do colleagues have any questions for Andrew at this time? I'm seeing nobody indicate. So I will move on first to our member advocate, which is Councillor McDonnell.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. I'm here this evening to ask you to consider and weigh the planning policy against sound reasoning, which will show that the proposed application will have less impact on greenbelt, openness, and the neighbouring residents. There is no dispute that this increase against the original building is large, but the property sits on a large plot of some quarter of an acre. Surely logic says that the scale must be in proportion to the size of the plot, rather than the scale of expansion in isolation. The original building covered some 14% of the plot, whilst the revised proposal before you will cover some 38% in total. Still, we suggest a modest percentage of site cover, which therefore in itself does not constitute overdeveloping the site. The planning officer suggests an impact upon openness, which is an important greenbelt consideration. However, he does not mention that the property has a 6-foot wall running from the garage to the house, stopping open views across the rear fields. The same is the case at number 5. In both cases, these walls were erected for the safety of children playing in the gardens, as the road outside has drivers driving in and out of the village at excessive speeds, and to help reduce the noise from the railway. Under permitted development, this building can be erected past the end of the property line, having a far more detrimental impact on openness as well as the adjoining houses. The current application is less than the approved 2016 plan. The planning officer suggests that the consideration now must take into account of the new local plan. It is true that the local plan is now in place, but substantially the local plan points to section 154 and 155 of the NPPF, which has not changed to any significant degree. It is also the case that the local plan was the emerging plan for many years and therefore should have been taken into consideration. It is also worth noting that the same planning officer considered another extension in Great Wymondley in the past 2 years. In that case, at Hillbrow, he concluded that the large extension, which took the building as a proportion of the site from 38% to 65%, was not excessive, even though it adjoined a listed building. It seems at odds with his thinking in this case. It is unfortunate that the occupants did not immediately progress the 2016 approved application on taking occupancy of the property. However, this application is far more sympathetic to the green belt and openness of the site. Just like the introduction of indoor bathrooms, offices are the new norm when designing a house, and we see office on all new development plans. With more and more of us working from home, separating work life and home life is key to ensure a healthy balance. Highways also argue that the roads in our county can cope with additional housing as there is a large population that works from home. In closing, I would like to highlight how important young families are to the growth and vitality of a village. Both Sean and Emma are actively involved in village life, and allowing them to set up a forever home will help this community to thrive. I thank you for listening and ask that you approve this planning application.
Thank you very much. Do you colleagues have any questions for Councillor McDonnell? Yes, Councillor Brown.
Yes, I've got one question. It's about the permitted development. You made a comparison between what's proposed and what could be done under permitted development. Could you say a bit more about that and say exactly where it would be and where it would be permitted?
So the permitted development would be below the line of the building, which would essentially be at the bottom of the garden, which overlooks the fields on that side.
So it's behind the existing building rather than where the wall is?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions or points of clarification, colleagues? Nope. I'm seeing no one indicate. Right. Now I have to do the really awkward thing. I'm so sorry, Councillor McDonnell. Please, can you leave the room? And of course, you can watch on YouTube, but we'll be on delay. Someone will come get you. Right. Okay, so next up, I have Sean Doherty, who is the applicant. Sean, you've got 5 minutes.
Thank you very much and good evening. So my wife and I have lived at the property since January 2019. Since moving to Great Wymondley, our family has grown. We now have 2 daughters. One arrived just about a month ago, and our 4-year-old we hope to start in the local primary school this September. Throughout our time here, we've been actively engaged in village life, from running the village Facebook pages to setting up community broadband schemes, as well as being active members of various social groups. In short, we love the village, care about its well-being and our neighbours, and have a strong emotional attachment to our property, which, as Councillor McDonald said, we see as our forever home. Part of our reason for purchasing the property was that it had the potential to improve and grow with our family as our needs changed. The planning application from 2016, which was approved by the previous owner, had a large increase of space in an annex, which was 88 square metres, and gave us reason to believe that this sort of improvement would be possible in future, even if not immediately needed when we first moved in. With this application, we are looking to build an annex that will help fit our needs for the next 20 years of our working life. Since the pandemic, my wife has been a home worker, whilst I have been hybrid working between home and office. Having a space with clear separation between work and home available would be of real benefit to these now normalised ways of working, and equally being able to house gym equipment away from 2 young children would help us fit in some much needed exercise, which we get far too little of. In our attempts to try and improve the property, we have looked for solutions which would avoid harm to the village and the surrounding areas. We've consulted neighbours and we've ensured they were happy with the best approach was being taken. However, intersecting planning laws between the Greenbelt conservation area and changing local plans has made a real challenge for us to try and navigate it all. Our previous application in 2023 looked to extend the main house as arguably a more sympathetic addition than the 2016 application. And when this was rejected, the planning officer's guidance was that we should look at what permitted development options were available to us. Through looking at this, we arrived at an annex with a layout similar to the 34 square metres one in the current proposal, suggested as a fairly modest addition compared to the size of the plot, which is close to 1/4 of an acre. Under permitted development rules in the conservation area, this would have been allowed at a line past the end of the property. However, upon assessing the impact this would have, we believe that the submitted proposal is more in line with the overriding aims of the Greenbelt conservation area and generally more fit for purpose than this implicit fallback for the following reasons. So first of all, it would be in place of the existing 6-foot high brick wall, which has already been mentioned. It would be in an area enclosed by the wall, house and garage, where it would be really difficult to describe as an open space currently and is somewhat wasted at the moment. Secondly, it would avoid consuming genuine open space at the backs onto the fields at the back for both the fielding and access to and from the main house, which we then have to put in. It would avoid any felling of trees and the removal of potentially an existing in-use greenhouse. Thirdly, it would not overlook or impact our neighbours' view in any way, which was an important point when we were consulting them on this application. Fourth, a position at the front allows us to more effectively monitor deliveries, visitors during the day. Our next door neighbour recently was burgled in the middle of the day, so security is an important concern for us. And finally, it aligns well with the adjoining property, which has a similar size annex anyway to the side of the house and an openness backing onto the field. In setting this out, we hope to respond positively to the planning officer's statement in 4.3.16 of his report that the applicant has not put forward very special circumstances case by reference to material consideration, such as any fallback position. By making this more explicit that our proposal was intended as an overall less harmful and more fit for purpose location than the fallback enabled by permitted development. We would ask the council to question who the beneficiaries would be in refusing what we believe is to be the most appropriate location for the proposed annex, which has less impact to the openness of the plot and is better for both the neighbours and us. We remain open to a site visit to look beyond the wall and to assess and are happy to discuss any impact of location in person and explore any suggestions on the design to make it more acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very well timed as well. Thank you. Do colleagues have any questions or points of clarification to ask Sean? Yes, Councillor Prescott.
Thank you. Can I ask, Sean, have you had any objections or any adverse comments from anybody?
I believe it's gone before the parish council, and like I say, we consulted on both sides of our neighbours, so there's been no objections.
Okay. Any further questions, colleagues? No. Yes, Councillor Bryant.
Could I ask you about the fabric of the proposed building and how it fits in with the fabric of your present building, the present home?
Yeah, I believe we believe it's aligned with what we've already got. And obviously, being in where it is, it would be sort of very odd looking, I think, to put something completely different in construction to it. So I believe it's in line with the existing materials of the existing house and garage, in fact.
Okay. Any further questions or points you wish to clarify, colleagues? No, right. I'm seeing no one indicate. So I will pass back to Andrew if there are any points that you wish to address.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I do. So our responses to some of the points that have been raised are that Greenbelt policy does require that the scale of the proposal has to relate to the size of the original building rather than the size of the plot. In terms of openness, the proposed building would be higher than the wall, and it would have more of a visual impact than the existing wall. A permitted development option, as has been stated, would be available at the back of the site behind the existing house, but I think that should be able to be achieved by and should be less visible than the building as is currently proposed. The 2016 planning permission was considered under different policy considerations under a different local plan, where there was more of a visual emphasis in terms of assessing that application, whereas now this proposal relates more to the current NPPF, which is referenced in the local plan policy SP5, and the Hillbrow application that was referred to, that I don't recall it, but the percentage increase is quite a bit less than is proposed here, which is around 200%. Also in terms of permitted development and neighbouring impacts, a permitted development option doesn't necessarily need to cause any adverse impact to neighbours, provided it is done sympathetically. Those are my responses to the points raised. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Okay, colleagues. So the officer recommendation on this item is to refuse, but as always, I am happy to take any proposal from the floor to move us forward into a debate. Councillor Mason.
Before we do that, Chair, are we able to ask any questions of the officer still at this stage, or is that boat sailed?
You can. I will allow it for the purposes of logic, because it might influence which way we wish to debate. Yep.
Would the granting of this application set any precedent for the other houses along that road, or for elsewhere in the village?
I think there's a high chance that it could do. It's quite a bit more in terms of floor space than we would normally, that we've been, certainly I think that, to my knowledge, that we've been allowing recently in the Greenbelt in the last few years. I think anything sort of around 70-80% in terms of floor space increase would really be sort of towards the upper limits of what we would normally have approved. I think And I think such instances are probably very rare. I can't think of any that have been that high. I think it could potentially, yes, set a precedence, or well, would make it difficult to argue that similar applications in terms of floor space increases could be difficult to defend against, perhaps.
Okay. Councillor Brown.
I'd like to make a proposal that we grant and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jarvis.
I mean, it seems to me that the issue here hinges on the definition of what is disproportionate, and it seems to me that there's an argument that disproportionate doesn't just relate to floor area, but to the impact of the building. And in those circumstances, I think we have to consider the harm that would potentially be caused to the green belt. And I find it difficult to believe that this fundamentally underlines any of the objectives of the green belt in terms of openness or any of those other issues. So it does come back to the question of, would this be disproportionate? And I think in the circumstances, it would not be disproportionate in terms of its impact. It might be in terms of its floor area, but not in terms of its overall appearance and impact. And on that basis, I can see no reason why we should not grant permission for this.
And I assume you're seconding, are you, Steve? Thank you. Councillor Prescott.
I'd like to third it, actually. You know, I've been involved in planning committees for many, many years. I might have mentioned that. And I've seen all sorts of applications, and I've heard all sorts of arguments from planning officers and also from members of the public. And I think one of the reasons planning committees in general, not this one in particular, but planning committees in general, get some very bad press is because they make what appear to the average member of the population to be illogical decisions. You have applications, and I don't want to name names, but you have applications that have come before us, even in the last few months, where any right-minded person would look at it and go, how on earth did that get approval? And you get something like this coming along, and you think, well, why on earth would you not approve something like this? It appears, and I'm listening to what my colleagues have said, it doesn't appear to be particularly offensive. Nobody has objected to it. We've got to apply a little degree of common sense here. And it strikes me that if we're, and I don't want to say, well, we're approving other things elsewhere and therefore we've got to approve this. But some of the stuff we have approved, the committee, the council, and councils up and down the country are approving, are frankly hideous. And I know we need more houses. I get that. But we've all said yes to things that we didn't really like. And we've all had to defend planning committee decisions to the general public and parish council and all the rest. And you think, why did we approve that? And yet we get something like this comes along, which has an awful lot of common sense logic behind it. And we're told to refuse, or the recommendation is to refuse. I'm sorry, I just don't agree with that. I would support what my colleagues have said. I think we should approve this one.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bryant.
Thank you. I appreciate what you've just said, but we are talking about this particular plan application, not any others in the authority or in the country. And having read the report by the planning officer, it's made quite clear that the rules have changed. He's looking at the present rules, which are the rules since December 2024. So we're only talking about 2 months old. But they have changed for this development. It's a pity that in fact it wasn't put in earlier, because that would have made a difference. So we actually have 2 things here. We have the actual planning regulations and considerations as they are now compared to the history of the plot. And I think we've also got to look at whether there are special circumstances to actually overturn those in terms of Greenbelt and the area that it's in. And it's a difficult one. I know it is a difficult one, but I can understand why the officer has made that recommendation, because he's going by the rules, and these are the rules. and we cannot forget that. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Mason.
Thank you. I'm torn. From the question I asked, probably people know which way my mind's working, which is about the precedence it sets. And looking at it, you've got three pairs of houses with quite large gaps in between, and I'm just wondering if in 6 months' time someone comes back and wants to build a 3-bed house in one of the gaps between these, we'd be looking at it in quite the same way, but whether we'd have set a precedent here on that, whether that's not relevant, I don't know, but perhaps someone can clarify that. But that's my biggest concern. And obviously, as Councillor Bryant has said, trying to struggle within the rules and not to, again, set precedent by saying, well, we don't like the rules in this case, so we're just going to ignore them.
Before I go to Councillor Brown, I'm going to ask Andrew actually for a little bit of assistance, or perhaps Sean could assist as well, because it seems to me that we're having a conversation about hard and fast policy rules, in particular subsection C of paragraph 154 of the NPPF, versus what I think I will put words into colleagues' mouths to describe as a common sense and logic approach. So to help us with that, this point around permitted development rights, could potentially the exact same building be put somewhere else on this plot of land under PDR, thus negating the need for a planning application?
To give such a matter full weight, we would normally expect to see a certificate of lawfulness showing what is proposed under permitted development. You'd give varying degrees of weight to a fallback, what is called a fallback position offered by permitted development, depending upon what you've got before you to assess. In this instance, all we've got is alleged permitted development rights, and that usually is the lower end of weight to give. Whereas if you've got, for example, a certificate of lawfulness that identifies what you intend to build under permitted development rights, you've got something tangible to compare this proposal against, and therefore you give it much greater weight. So whilst permitted development rights is a material consideration that can be taken into account, normally I would give it limited weight because we've got nothing there to compare this proposal against, if that makes sense. With regards to Councillor Mason's comments about precedent is a material planning consideration, and what people have done elsewhere is often quoted when people are seeking planning permission. But at the end of the day, each application is considered on its own merits. And this application should also be considered on its own merits. Now, we did mention in the report that no very special circumstances have been put forward. We consider it disproportionate, not in relation to what's there at the moment, but in relation to the cumulative effect of all previous extensions and this proposal altogether, because that's what policy says you must assess. You don't assess it against what's existing, you assess it against the original dwelling before it was extended, and it's been extended or will be extended by about 200%. So that's why we're recommending refusal. It's conflict with Greenbelt policy. We've set out in the report that in terms of effect upon the character and appearance of the area, effect upon neighbours, we raise no objection as officers to that. It's purely on Greenbelt. Now, if members consider that it's not, in their view, disproportionate, then you're entitled to do so, and you're entitled to come to a different decision. Also this evening, the applicant has raised material considerations that members may consider to be very special circumstances that may clearly outweigh the harm to the Greenbelt that we've identified. None were put with the application, but this evening, material considerations were put forward by the applicant that members could reasonably consider to be very special circumstances. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Brown, I had you first, but I've got other speakers, and bearing in mind what Sean has said, do you want to go now or do you want to recalibrate? Excellent. Councillor Peace.
Well, I think my main concern would have been setting a precedent, so it's good to hear that we should be looking at all applications on their individual merits. And we often see reports where we have to balance the harms versus the benefits of applications. And I think on this occasion, given the fact that there is a 6-foot wall there already, that the harm of this is considerably outweighed by, the benefit of this is considerably outweighed by the harm of putting the same building at the bottom of the garden, where it would be hindering the green belt and the views a lot more than it would be where the applicant's considering placing it. And in terms of, well, are we allowing us somebody putting a 3-bedroom house in one of those gaps? Well, building a 2-storey building would be a different proposition to building a single-storey building where you already have a wall there of approximately that height anyway. So I really can't see the harm in this.
Thank you. Councillor Mantle.
Thank you. The basic principle we've got to consider is what harm is it doing to the green belt? Because it seems to be that's the only issue in contention. And looking at the pictures and looking at the site, I am having difficulty in seeing how this is a material detriment to the green belt. It seems to me that it's basically just sort of a small adjustment within a site which, frankly, my view, is doubtful to be called green belt. It's not sort of standard green belts stuff. It's just a house which happens to be in the green belt. And it seems to me that the material damage to the green belt, I'm waiting to be persuaded that there is such material damage. It's the difference to the view over the green belt is, to my mind, so marginal as to be insignificant.
Yes, Councillor Brown.
I was wondering if we could have some of the pictures back. Is that allowed?
Yep. Do you know which ones you want?
I'd like the
photographs?
picture of the one with the wall in between the garage and the building, and then the picture of the proposed elevation of the next to the house between the garage, that the proposed elevation would be really helpful. Okay, so go back to that one. Oh, yes. So we can see from that the roof is slightly higher. I don't know how much higher. Andrew could probably tell us than that 6-foot wall. But that the view of through to the green belt is blocked by that 6-foot wall and slightly more blocked by that roof. Can you go to the next one? And likewise, a similar sort of thing we can see there. So there is something slightly higher. And then can you go to the actual photographs of that wall? Back a bit, because I think, yeah, the one that was face on was easier to see. Yeah. Yes, there. So we're talking about putting something of a similar size to what's on the garage there, in between, is that right? And so I mean, I'm arguing, like Councillor Peace has argued, that the impact to the green belt is negligible. I think if that wall wasn't there, it would be a different matter. But that wall is there, and we're talking about a few extra feet, and actually something that probably looks rather nicer than what they have there already. So I don't believe it's disproportionate. It's not bigger than the house. It's a similar size to the current garage. And I think the NPPF says, if I can read it, that the extension or alterations of a building, provided that it does not result in disproportionate additions over and above the size of the original building. It's not 2 stories high, and therefore it's not disproportionate, and therefore I believe we should be granting this.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Brown. And I think from my perspective, the definition of disproportionate, I don't think it's a word that's defined, is it? So it's one of those where it's left open to common sense and interpretation. So it's going to be subjective, and it's going to vary from application to application. As has already been said, we take each application on its own merits. I think that this is a question of policy versus logic, or the rigid application of policy rules versus that practical consideration of, does this increased massing amount to something that is disproportionate? Is this a case that could be similar to a house in an urban setting that has had its floor space significantly increased and has had extensions that overlook neighbours and is causing harm and is out of character with the area? Or is this an application of a different type? And I think members need to come to their own conclusions when they're weighing up and balancing that. The advice from officers is the only harm to the green belt is this point around subsection C of paragraph 154 of the NPPF. I have seen nobody else indicating they wish to speak on this. I think that all but one of our members has said something in this debate. So I think, colleagues, we are in a place where we can move to the vote unless there are, sorry, all but two members. Thank you. I think unless anybody has anything else they wish to say, or there's a final policy question that we need guidance on from officers. I'm seeing nobody indicate. Sean, have you got anything else to say in summing up?
Perhaps we should consider if there's any conditions, if you're seeking to grant planning permission, whether there are any conditions that you'd wish to impose on the application. Under normal circumstances, if we were recommending approval of this application, we'd be recommending that the development be commenced within 3 years. That's a standard commencement condition. That the development be implemented in accordance with the submitted drawings. That's a standard condition. Another standard condition would be that the material should match the existing dwelling. And finally, with such outbuildings, we normally impose a standard condition requiring that it be occupied ancillary to the main house rather than, and therefore prevent it being occupied as a potentially separate dwelling.
I've seen sub nods. See what happens when you go against officer recommendations. You create this additional work for yourselves, don't you, colleagues? Right. So some very valid points about conditions. This is a motion that was proposed by Councillor Brown and seconded by Councillor Jarvis. There is an amendment to the motion that it is suggested we make in terms of those conditions. Councillor Brown, would you be happy with a suggested amendment along the lines of the conditions proposed?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, those make absolute sense. Very happy to accept all those conditions.
And I ought to ask the applicant as well. You've heard the conditions that the officer read. Would you be content with those conditions if we chose to grant the application?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Colleagues, I can see Councillor Mason's indicated. I'll hold a second on that. And Steve as well to second. Would you accept those? Are there any other conditions, Councillors Brown and Jarvis primarily, but also open to all colleagues, that you reasonably believe we ought to consider or you would like additional guidance from officers on? Okay. I don't think that officers are suggesting or advising the committee to consider any other conditions, unless there's anything from anyone's experience you wish to put forward. Okay, so I think then that the motion to approve, subject to the conditions that were stated by Sean, has been proposed. It's been seconded. We've had reasonable debate and discussion and conversation around this. Could we please move to a vote?
That vote's carried.
Thank you very much. So just for clarity, what that means is that we have resolved to grant the application subject to conditions. And I believe officers will be in touch and sort of work through and support you through the remainder of the process from here. Could we please go and bring Caroline back in for the sake of one tiny administrative item? go. Thank you, and welcome back, Councillor McDonnell. So, as I said at the start of the meeting, item number 7 has been withdrawn from this agenda and will come back at a future date, which leaves us with agenda item number 8, which is the appeals update. Colleagues will note this is a very brief update on the printed papers. I don't know, Sean, if you have anything in additional that you want to update us on since then.
Something very minor, but there's obviously on this agenda, there's one appeal lodged to report, and that's relating to an altered vehicle access to facilitate a community car park at Old Hale Way, Hitchin, and that's that we were through the written representations procedure. The only other matter that I perhaps should mention is that Respring public inquiry once again. Once again, I remind members that it's scheduled to commence on the 29th of April and scheduled to last 4 days. It is possible that we may report back to committee with regards to any advice that we receive from Council, who we've appointed between now and then. I don't know whether we will, but I just put forward the possibility that we may well do so. And under such circumstances, such a report would normally be confidential. Okay. And that's it for me.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions on the appeals tracker? Nope. Lovely. Right. In that case, colleagues, thank you very much. That brings tonight's meeting to a close, and I will see you in just over a week's time on the 6th of March, as if we didn't do enough planning business, which will be a Thursday. And as a reminder to colleagues, new start time of 7 o'clock, not 7:30. Everybody arrived on time though, so I think the message has got through tonight. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.